All right, welcome to StereoPsych. I'm Stephen Downey, a clinical psychologist from Australia. Today we'll be doing a breakdown on a Reddit post like we normally do. I'll move the camera because I constantly forget this. There we go, my face. Yeah, feel free to submit things in the comments if you've got things that you want me to review. Otherwise, I'll just be sort of doing these. Today we're actually in Am I Wrong because I already surfed the Am I the Asshole one and I like to come at this stuff fresh. So I switched over here and I've not read these ones. So this is just the first one, the Am I Wrong one. So we shall rip through it. I'll read it from beginning to end and then do a bit of a breakdown on how I would think about something like this. Like if you like it, subscribe if you want to see more like this, and let's get into it. Right, am I wrong for telling my husband he's an embarrassment? Hi everyone, it's my first time using Reddit, so cut me some slack. I, a 25-year-old female, found out that my husband, 26-year-old male, cheated on me with his coworker. He came clean to me a few nights ago because he felt guilty. He said it was a mistake and only lasted for a week. He said he loved me and she didn't mean anything to him. He wanted to work on our marriage and he made a list of marriage counselors that we could see. He blocked her and turned in his 2 week notice so he could move to another job closer to where we live. He showed me all their texts and calls. He even sent her a text telling her he didn't want to continue a relationship with her. When he told me he cheated on me, I felt numb. I wanted to cry, but I chose not to because he doesn't deserve to see me cry. I was so, and still am, incredibly angry at him. How could he throw away our relationship like that, all for some fun? That same night, I contacted a divorce lawyer. I gathered all the texts he'd sent her, packed a bag, and left to stay at my parents' place. When my parents asked why I left him, I told them the truth. They were angry at him, but begged me to stay with him. I firmly told them that I was going to leave him no matter how hard he tried to fix his mistake. In my eyes, my husband is now a cheater and nothing can fix that. He knew I had zero tolerance rule for cheating and he broke that. Now he has to deal with the consequences. A lot of our family members and friends know about the affair now. Some are asking me to reconsider divorcing him because of all the steps he took to reconcile with me. He's been blowing up my phone and reiterating that it meant nothing to him. Well then, I must have meant less than nothing if he was willing to pick her over me. I have no plans on filing for divorce on the grounds of adultery. I just want this to be quick and over so I can move and find someone who's actually loyal and not a complete piece of crap. Recently, he called me, and against the advice of my lawyer, I picked up. He once again begged me to reconsider and said I was the only woman in the world for him. I was the only woman in the world for me, meaning for him. I told him that it's best for him to get himself a divorce lawyer and to move on. He said he wouldn't do that because he believed that our marriage was fixable. I told him that our marriage wasn't fixable because of how much of an embarrassment his infidelity was to me. I felt a little bad because he started to cry and apologized for hurting and embarrassing me. I just hung up. His parents called me and said they understood where I was coming from, that my comment was inappropriate and hurtful. My sister thinks I'm being an asshole and I said it out of spite. So was I wrong? Right. What would I do to approach some situation like this? The first thing this person needs, by the looks of it, is some validation of that they are a human being that is entitled to hold their boundaries, and that when somebody else breaks your boundaries, they deal with the consequences of breaking those boundaries, and that she is not in the slightest in the wrong for enforcing what was very clear boundaries, at least as far as the information that we have. Yeah, there's not a lot of directions to go. I think this person needs a bit of support from people around them. I do find it funny here that people get really well, kind of like this, where even like friends and things like that will get involved and tell you how they think that you should be living your life because of some actions that have been taken by somebody else, and it's kind of like this is one of those deal breaker things. Like it's a fairly well-known one. You cheat on somebody, you get found out. In this case, you get found out because you could not handle the guilt of what you've done. He wasn't caught in the classic sense of the term. He came clean, but at the end of the day, I think he was expecting like a George Washington chopping down the cherry tree experience. Like you confess to it and then you don't get in trouble because you confess to it. Like that's just not how this works, you know? I work with a lot of people who have cheated, and I've worked with a lot of people that have been cheated on, and it is surprising to me what expectations people bring to these sorts of situations, where it's just been a really clear, laid out boundary. And so, bottom line is, in a situation like this person needs a bit of validation around that. But where my mind is drawn, and the reason about the validation, is actually got to do with this. His parents called and said they understood where I was coming from, but that my comment was inappropriate and hurtful. What the heck is inappropriate and hurtful about saying that his infidelity was an embarrassment? Of course it is. That's just an accurate reflection of your own feelings. I tell you what, it's possibly a lot more than that to this person. Like, they've told us that how angry they are, and it's like, my sister thinks I'm being an asshole and that I said it out of spite. And what would be wrong with that? Let's say that's true. Is she wrong? No. So like this family is strange. And what hits me about this is that I'm left wondering whether or not, I know that I sort of bring up the cultural card every now and again, but the way that this family is sort of packing around this bloke, I wonder whether or not there are some cultural elements to this, because otherwise it strikes me as a little strange. We're going to do something we don't normally do. I'm interested to see if they've made comments on it. No, they haven't. Granted, it's only 4 hours ago. But in 96 comments, they have not yet responded. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Again, you've got these people who are somewhat helpful. I rarely go to the comments, but you know, some of this stuff is okay, but it's also out of line. Like, his family is crap, so it tracks he is too. I understand that this is an overstep where the parents call on the son's behalf. It's sort of like, let the man fight his own fights here. Is it completely unusual? Not necessarily, you know. But yeah, like it's that. And he's an embarrassment and an effing loser. I don't get cheaters. F him and his parents and your sister. Well, hang on. Like, you know, there's a lot of relationships in here, and there's a lot about the situation that we don't know. You know, like, let's say hypothetically, this man was a chronic cheater before they got married, and she married him knowing that he's cheated in the past. You know, would that change anything here? It doesn't change the boundary and the setup, but it would change how I would look at some of the family interactions to kind of go, okay, if 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 this is them sitting on the ultimate I told you so moment for a woman that believed that she could fix this man, and all of a sudden what played out was exactly what people thought would play out, then I could understand the family reaction. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying one of the differences in the ways that a psychologist will approach this kind of thing versus the general public is we really do try hard not to make assumptions about things, particularly in situations like this, where we sort of go, okay, am I with other people that the family's behavior is kind of odd? The family's behavior is odd, right? However, if there were cultural factors at play, I would expect it. And so then it wouldn't be odd. It would be essentially par for the course for the cultural factors at play in the situation. If there was a history of cheating or something like that, and this person was actually advised not to go ahead with this relationship, and they have anyway, and we're just sitting in a situation where it's like, well, what did you expect? Again, I can understand the family's reaction. I don't necessarily agree with their reaction, but I can understand it. And I think, you know, one of the reasons why I started doing this was I noticed the way that people would come at this was very often just, there were assumptions in it. There was support, but support that kind of goes a little too far. Support sometimes that just inflames the anger. Like, this woman does not necessarily need more anger in her life, you know? So you offer the validation, but you don't necessarily fan the flames of the anger, because it's so like, well, how does that help her? You know, she's trying to move on and do other things with her life, you know? Yeah, and it's sort of like, this person here, this I would look at and go, this just strikes me as inflaming the anger. And then we get this sort of stuff here. And this is where we're not even allowed to do this sort of stuff. Like, can you imagine? I wonder if they're all cheaters and they're just trying to cover each other's backs. You know, like, come on, we don't get to just make up details here. This is not bad, right? Has to live with the consequences despite everybody not wanting to. That's decent validation here. But this stuff is just fanning the flames of anger. Is this person wrong? No. Are they allowed to think that? No. Like, well, sorry, yes, there's no problems with them thinking that. It's just, is that what this person actually needs? Well, no, it's not. This next one is the same thing, just riffing on it, you know, and then just, you know, it's kind of like this is often how people try to support somebody that needs validation in terms of what they think is the person wants to validate their anger, where the person really wants validation of like, you know, please support me in holding my boundaries. Tell me that I'm not wrong in holding boundaries where I set up a boundary. Validate my feelings around, yeah, my anger, but maybe also empathize with that I've just lost a relationship that I cared about. And, you know, I actually feel like I am, she says in here, essentially less than nothing. You know, I must be less than nothing because of he picked her. Yeah, well, then I must have met less than nothing if he was willing to pick her over me. I look at that and I kind of go, what's happened to your self-concept in that this person has chosen to cheat over you? And, you know, we want to be like proper support is going to be validating the holding of the boundary, going to be validating that his actions are not a reflection of her worth. You know, giving some space for her to be able to express her feelings. I can't imagine in this situation that she's had a lot of space to just be able to talk freely about what this means for her. And as much as she's sort of in the anger and that kind of stuff that's going on, there's probably a lot more feelings going on. And I'd be curious in her current situation whether or not she's had the opportunity to talk about any of that, because it seems like people are a little too busy trying to tell her how to live a life in terms of either divorce him or get back together with him, and not just like sitting with this person and going, you actually okay? You know, all this has happened and it's sort of, you know, was your marriage relationship and, you know, they picked somebody else and you've got some anger, yeah, but are there other things going on as well in terms of how you're dealing with this? You know, you're struggling to hold some of the boundaries the lawyers put forward regarding don't pick up the phone. How can we help you with that? Because that's a pretty important boundary to hold. You know, what's getting in the way of you being able to, like, to not pick up the phone? Do you have other feelings, or did you not have support and you just wanted to talk to him and at least hear his voice because you don't have a lot of other support? Like, those are the things that I would be looking at to kind of go, what's difficult in this situation for this person, who clearly knows what they want, and yet they're struggling a little bit with how they're executing on that. You know, there's clearly still feelings involved. Like, I felt bad because he started to cry. You know, this person is more ambivalent than they probably are putting forward here, and that's not going to be helped with having put out a clear boundary, and yet a lot of their friends and family are kind of pushing them to not hold said boundary. You know, I think that would be where my mind would go in a situation like this, to sort of look at, yeah, on the face value, yeah, terrible, cheated, came clean, you know, anger, cool. But there's a lot more going on with this. And I think, you know, in a situation like this, if you just gave somebody the space to speak, right, and did your level best to say nothing, right? In case you're wondering, right? So let me try to be as concrete and helpful for these situations as possible, right? If you want to support somebody like this, you meet up with them in person, right? And then you open the floor for them to speak, right? And your job is to say as close to nothing as possible. Respond only to direct questions and keep it short. They don't need your monologue, right? You just open the floor and you let them say anything and everything that they want to say. And what you will notice with a person like this, if you leave them to it, is they will go through a series of ups and downs and that kind of stuff. And your job is to regulate with them, right? Literally just be in the room, keep yourself neutral. They don't need you to escalate and be angry, because then they're just going to escalate and be angry with you. They don't need you to be sad and not even able to hold your own tears in, right? What they need is they need you to listen and regulate. And when they're all the way up here and they're looking at you and they're like, rah, 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 right? Your understanding, right, face is just sitting there going, I hear you, and that's rubbish, but I don't have to meet you up here. And they will regulate back down. And that is incredibly good for humans, to just be able to, we call it co-regulating, right? There's a whole field of called interpersonal neurobiology, which effectively, the long and the short of it is that by being a calming presence, literally just your job is to be a calm presence, you give somebody the ability to regulate down with you and to regulate up with you. And that's actually the benefit you bring to the room. It's not your wisdom and pontificating. It's your ability to stay regulated when they are not, so that they can literally use your regulation when they have run out of their own, and that's how you support somebody in this sort of situation. Because often if I'm sitting in a situation like this, and frankly, when I look at this and I go, there's a little more ambivalence here than what I thought off of her initial very strong statements, I would be cautious as a psychologist to actually not push her one way or the other. And I would be very careful, and I'm talking very careful, not to push her one way or the other, because she may actually be interested in turning around. All this talk about the strong boundary and stuff like that might actually be her being self-protective about her own self-worth, where really, if she were to find some way, another way to deal with that, her feelings on this could blackfit completely. And I've been in that situation enough times that I would be very cautious before pushing her one way or the other. I would be letting her dictate everything about this, to the extent where I may not even back her up on decisions that I don't think that she's completely sure on. And I'll simply be talking to her about her level of certainty, about her decisions and her thoughts, right? Without offering my own. Because in situations like this, you can accidentally push people in directions because they're kind of emotional and vulnerable. You can push them in decisions that they might not want at the end of the day. And so it's about trying to stay in that middle ground. Where somebody has been, is in a domestic violence situation or something like that, absolutely, I will not be doing that. I'll be pushing them towards safety, But in a situation like this, where it's a breaking of boundaries, but it is not, as far as I can see, it's not sort of abusive or anything like that. I would be, again, practicing that sort of blank slate approach of going, I don't know what this person wants, so I'm just going to wait and see and let them figure that out and help them to be sure of their own thinking and decision making, and being very careful not to add my own. Anyway, we shall finish that up there. Have a good time, everybody, and I shall catch you in the next one. All right, see you.